Buckingham Palace is the London residence and administrative headquarters of the monarch of the United Kingdom. Located in the city of Westminster, the palace is often at the centre of state occasions and royal hospitality. It has been a focal point for the British people at times of national rejoicing and mourning. Originally known as Buckingham House, the building at the core of today's palace was a large townhouse built for the Duke of Buckingham in 1703 on a site that had been in private ownership for at least 150 years. It was acquired by King George III in 1761 as a private residence for Queen Charlotte and became known as the Queen's House. During the 19th century it was enlarged, principally by architects John Nash and Edward Blore, who constructed three wings around a central courtyard. Buckingham Palace became the London residence of the British monarch on the accession of Queen Victoria in 1837. The last major structural additions were made in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, including the east front, which contains the well-known balcony on which the royal family traditionally congregates to greet crowds. The palace chapel was destroyed by a German bomb during World War II. The Queen's Gallery was built on the site and opened to the public in 1962 to exhibit works of art from the royal collection. The original early 19th century interior designs, many of which survive, include widespread use of brightly colored scagliola and blue and pink lapis, on the advice of Sir Charles Long. King Edward VII oversaw a partial redecoration in a belle epoque cream and gold color scheme. Many smaller reception rooms are furnished in the Chinese Regency style with furniture and fittings brought from the Royal Pavilion at Brighton and from Carlton House. The palace has 775 rooms, and the garden is the largest private garden in London. The staterooms, used for official and state entertaining, are open to the public each year for most of August and September and on some days in winter and spring. During World War I, the palace, then the home of King George V and Queen Mary, escaped unscathed. Its more valuable contents were evacuated to Windsor, but the royal family remained in situ. The king imposed rationing at the palace, much to the dismay of his guests and household. To the king's later regret, David Lloyd George persuaded him to go further by ostentatiously locking the wine cellars and refraining from alcohol, to set a good example to the supposedly inebriated working class. In 1938, the Northwest Pavilion, designed by Nash as a conservatory, was converted into a swimming pool. During World War II, the palace was bombed 9 times, the most serious and publicized of which resulted in the destruction of the palace chapel in 1940. Coverage of this event was played in cinemas all over the UK to show the common suffering of rich and poor. One bomb fell in the palace quadrangle while King George VI and Queen Elizabeth were in residence, and many windows were blown in and the chapel destroyed. Wartime coverage of such incidents was severely restricted, however. The King and Queen were filmed inspecting their bombed home, the smiling Queen, as always, immaculately dressed in a hat and matching coat, seemingly unbothered by the damage around her. It was at this time the Queen famously declared, "I'm glad we have been bombed. Now I can look the East End in the face." The royal family were seen as sharing their subjects' hardship. On September 15, 1940, known as the Battle of Britain Day, an RAF pilot, Ray Holmes of No. 504 Squadron RAF rammed a German bomber he believed was going to bomb the palace. Holmes had run out of ammunition and made the quick decision to ram it. Holmes bailed out. Both aircraft crashed. In fact, the bomber was empty. It had already been damaged, 2 of its crew had been killed and the remainder bailed out. Its pilot, Feldwebel Robert Zepp, landed, only to die later of wounds suffered during the attack. The damaged palace was carefully restored after the war by John Molam and Company. It was designated a Grade I listed building in 1970. Every year, some 50,000 invited guests are entertained at garden parties, receptions, audiences, and banquets. Her Majesty's government is responsible for maintaining the palace in exchange for the profits made by the Crown Estate. In November 2015, the state dining room was closed for 6 months because its ceiling had become potentially dangerous. Thus, Buckingham Palace is a symbol and home of the British monarchy, an art gallery, and a tourist attraction.
child to have a German name. No, she's not there anymore.
No offence, my dear, but I...
Huh?
Huh?